students, teachers, and lovers of poetry. Today, let's do an analysis of An African Thunderstorm by David Rubadiri. In several poems that we've looked at so far, we've looked at the grandeur, the beauty, the tranquility of nature. In this poem, An African Thunderstorm, we see how vicious and destructive nature can be. Let us together unravel the trembling, rumbling, flashing images of this incredible storm that sweeps through an African village and leaves people scrambling and scampering. First, I'll read the poem, and then we'll go in between the lines. An African Thunderstorm. From the west, clouds came hurrying with the wind, turning sharply here and there, like a plague of locusts, whirling, tossing up things on its tail, like a madman chasing nothing. Pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills like sinister dark wings. The wind whistles by and trees bend to let it pass. In the village, screams of delighted children toss and turn in the din of the whirling wind. Women, babies clinging on their backs, dart about in and out, madly. The wind whistles by whilst trees bend to let it pass. Clothes wave like tattered flags, flying off to expose dangling breasts, as jagged blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm. Let's start with the title, An African Thunderstorm. By the way, this poem is full of tricky little details, so you will have to be patient as we work through everything. We will leave no stone unturned. Okay, the title. Already we see that there is danger. Thunderstorms are powerful, deadly. The title doesn't just say a storm, but a thunderstorm. This evokes images of lightning and thunder, incredible forces of nature. We see not only the power of the storm, but also the size, the scale. It's not a Nigerian or Kenyan or Ugandan storm, but an African thunderstorm, a raging beast of nature of continental proportions. Why might it be important to say that the thunderstorm is African? Well, we can expect to find themes that relate perhaps to race or geography, perhaps to African people or African culture, African history. This thunderstorm either belongs to Africa or happened to Africa. The point is, there's a connection between the storm and Africa. We all know that storms in literature usually represent problems, trials, conflicts. So here, we are probably dealing with a serious problem faced by African people. See how much we can get from the title alone? Let's go to lines 1 and 2. We see that clouds come hurrying with the wind. Where are the clouds and wind coming from? They're coming from the west. These two lines provide a lot of information. Let's get into it. First, we see that the poem's narrator, the speaker, is being approached by the wind and clouds. How do we know they're heading in his direction? He says they're coming, hurrying. So the perspective of the speaker might be one of fear, anticipation, anxiety. Clouds and winds are coming toward him. Not only are the clouds coming, but they're hurrying. This is personification. The clouds and winds aren't moving slowly. Clouds in other poems are usually said to drift lazily and aimlessly, but these clouds are on a mission, and they have a strong, fast wind to push them along. Again, where are the clouds and winds coming from? From the west. By now, it might be obvious that the word west here actually means the Western world, meaning the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. They are usually considered to be the West, geopolitically speaking. So to be clear, the western skies, the West here, is a symbol for the Western world, those powerful countries. So we see some clouds and winds coming from the west. What could all this be about? Obviously, these clouds and winds will develop into the thunderstorm the title speaks of. What storm, what problem did the West bring to Africa? If you look at the title and the first two lines, and also look at when the poem was published, sometime in the 1960s, when many African cultures were suffering at the hand of the West, then it becomes clear that the African thunderstorm has nothing to do with nature and lightning and thunder and wind and rain and clouds. Instead, This thunderstorm is colonialism, oppression, racism, injustice, social turmoil. This is the meaning of the African thunderstorm. This poem is what we call an allegory, meaning it is a story that explains some political or social issue. In this case, we're getting into what it was like for the African people who were under the colonial subjection of the West. The storm is itself a symbol for colonialism. So the main theme of this poem is colonialism and its effects on people, specifically Africans. There's also the theme of man versus nature, a theme that runs through many poems we've looked at so far. But this theme of man versus nature is used to illustrate the more important theme, which is that of colonialism and its effects. Look at the quickness and abruptness of the next two lines, turning sharply, here and there. We feel a sense of rapid, senseless movement. The approaching storm seems to be going everywhere. It seems to be moving haphazardly, randomly, here and there. Might also suggest that the problems of colonization, this kind of oppression, is not just here in Africa, but is there in other parts of the world as well. Look at the word sharply. Literally, in this case, it means abruptly. The clouds are making sharp, quick, angular turns. But sharp also means having an edge that can easily cut something, like a knife being sharp. So, through the diction used here, we see that the storm is moving rapidly, but more importantly, it is dangerous. It is cutting through houses and people, perhaps. It is sharp. We see too that the poem's form so far is depicting the sharpness and randomness of the storm. The lines are all over the place. Look at the short, sharp lines, with that one long line, line 2, sticking out. By the way, looking down the poem, we see that there are very few punctuation marks from beginning to end, marking the speed and relentlessness of the storm. We'll see that as we move forward. Next two lines, like a plague of locusts whirling. This is a biblical allusion. Here we allude to the plagues of Egypt. One of the plagues that God sent was locusts, which destroyed the Egyptians' crops. Forget about locusts. What is a plague? This is a terrible disease or any kind of widespread destruction. So we see that this simile of saying that the clouds and wind are like a plague of locusts means that they have come to destroy, to kill everything in its path. This storm has come to bring suffering and death. The storm, just like a plague of locusts, is whirling. Now we get the image of a tornado or cyclone. The wind is whirling, spinning. The whirling motion is often linked to dizziness, confusion, which is what the storm also brings. If you say, my mind is in a whirl, it means you're in a state of confusion. If you say, my life is in a whirl, it means many things are happening rapidly, and you don't feel like you can control anything. In the next line, we see that the storm is getting stronger. Now it's actually doing something. It is tossing up things on its tail. This means it is digging up and flinging things around. Maybe soil, maybe houses, or pieces of houses. Maybe people. It is raging and tossing things around. Perhaps people's lives are being turned upside down. As we come to the last line of this stanza, we see another simile. The storm is like a madman chasing nothing. This continues the depiction of craziness and haphazard movement. It also brings in themes around insanity, also mentality. So to recap stanza 1, the storm, which is colonialism, is a destructive and insane force. We see diction to support this, like hurrying, sharply, plague, locusts, whirling, tossing, madman. Next, we see pregnant clouds riding stately on the storm's back. The diction here is dense. Literally, the clouds are pregnant with rain, meaning they're full and ready to burst. But we know that these clouds are also pregnant with danger, with doom. First, the clouds were swift and mad. Now, they ride stately. This word means dignified, noble, worthy of respect, grand, impressive. Now we see the pompous pride of the colonizers who think they are superior to the African people. We see the storm as colonization and the clouds as the colonizers themselves. They roll in like royalty and take what they see. They think they're stately. They think they're royalty. They think they are superior beings. Stately here might also be a pun in reference to state, as in the clouds are related to a state or a country. This reinforces the idea of one country oppressing another, several Western countries oppressing several African countries. Riding on the back of something is also an interesting image, as it brings to mind the impression of the colonizers riding on the backs of the Africans. Not literally, well, hopefully not literally, meaning they are exploiting the Africans. The storm has been moving quickly, but it is now slowing down. It has found a place that it wants to stay. It has found a people that it wants to continue to destroy. The storm is gathering to perch on hills. Perch here gives us a metaphor in which the storm is also a bird. We see a simile in the next line. The storm, or maybe the clouds, are compared to sinister dark wings. First, we got the image of a bird, and now we have zoomed into the wings. Both sinister and dark give us images of evil and danger, villainousness. The storm is like an angel of death sweeping over Africa. Then we see some auditory imagery. The wind whistles by. We hear the whistling of the wind. Also, we hear it clearly in the alliterated sound, in wings, wind, whistles. This is the sound of a storm, or at least the sound of the wind that is coming to take the storm to us. Next, we see that trees bend to let it pass. The trees are personified. They're bending to let the storm pass. This storm is powerful, and they can't stand up to it. They bow in the presence of the stately storm. They don't want to be destroyed by the storm, so they bend to let it pass. Even the trees are afraid of this storm. So in stanza 1, the storm was approaching quickly and menacingly. In stanza 2, the storm has arrived and is making itself at home. Let's look at the next 4 lines together. In an African village, children are screaming delightedly, and these screams toss and turn in the din, in the noise of the storm. So the storm is wreaking havoc, and we have kids screaming in delight. Delight is usually used to describe a pleasant kind of excitement. So why are the children delighted in the storm? This here is irony, perhaps dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is a special type of irony where something, probably danger, is obvious to the reader but not obvious to the characters in a text. Here, we see the storm as dangerous, but the kids see it as something exciting. Back in 2004, Hurricane Ivan hit Jamaica. I watched as my family and as the entire country prepared for the storm. Being a child, I was excited to see what the storm would bring, what would happen. Even during the storm itself, what I felt was anticipation, excitement, a kind of delight. This was my first hurricane, and I didn't quite appreciate the danger it brought. Instead, I felt as if this was an exciting event. Plus, since it meant no school, it was doubly exciting to me. Similarly, the children in the village are naively excited about the storm, hence the screams of delighted children. But even though the kids seem to be excited, the word screams provides an undertone of anxiety. Perhaps their delight soon turns to dread as they realize what the storm is capable of. We have some personification in these lines. We see toss and turn in the din of the whirling wind. What is tossing and turning? The children, right? No, not the children. The screams of the children. The sound of screaming gets mixed in with the noise of the wind. The wind is so strong that it is drowning out the screams. People can't even hear the children screaming because of how loud the storm is. Also, we get the image of how easily nature can manipulate, can control and destroy, can outdo and subdue humans. Imagine the wind grabbing the screams and just tossing and throwing them about. A din is a loud noise. It is also a commotion, chaos. The storm is not only loud but very chaotic. We hear the storm's power and noise in the alliteration in the lines. We have the repeated t sound in toss and turn. We have the repeated w sound in whirring wind. We also have some consonants or perhaps internal slant rhymes in the repeated sounds, as we say in the din of the whirling wind. Also, look at how irregular the line lengths are. This is because there is no order to the storm, compared to the stanza about the clouds riding stately. That stanza is quite regular, because at that point the storm was not yet violent. When you look at the form of a poem, how the stanzas are arranged, how long the lines are, the punctuations used. You need to be able to comment on how the form matches the meaning. Why is this stanza written in this way? Why is that stanza written in that way? Why is the poem presented in this way? You have to understand how everything works to bring the poem together. Next up, we see women with babies on their backs, darting about, running around, trying to find some safety. They dart in and out madly. Again, we see language of madness, reminding us of the madman chasing nothing that we saw earlier. First, the storm was mad. Now, the people are mad. It is as if colonization has affected the people's minds, has made them go insane. We can also see a contrast between the children's response to the storm and the adults' response to the storm. The children are delighted, but the adults are going mad. They are terrified. Even the babies seem to sense the danger. They can feel the sense of danger through their mother's behavior. How do we know they feel the danger? They're clinging to their mothers. We get the sense of sporadic movement, of quick steps in the rhyming couplet here. Dart about, in and out. What are they going in and out of? Maybe their houses. Maybe they're trying to secure the babies. Maybe they're just running to wherever seems to be the safest place. Maybe they're escaping falling debris. Could they still be scampering to prepare for the storm? I don't think so, as the storm is already happening. Are they darting in and out of the village? Who knows? All we know is they're running about madly. Earlier we saw trees bending to let the storm pass. We see that line again. Why is this repeated? Why is this so important? So, back when we first saw the trees bending, they were the first things the storm was interacting with. After that, we see how the people deal with the storm. This time, the trees are here to give us a comparison between how the trees and how humans deal with the storm. The children are screaming, the mothers are darting in and out, the babies are clinging, whilst trees bend to let it pass. Whilst here makes this a comparative line. The humans are doing this while the trees are doing that. It suggests that humans and nature handle disasters differently. While humans probably become agitated and fearful and try to resist or escape, the trees just bend. They just give in. They just allow the storm to pass. Do the people bend? No, they do not. The people are resilient. The African people do not bend. They fight back. They run. They plan. They do not give up. They do not bend like trees. We can also notice a bit more windy alliteration in wind, whistles, whiles. Going down, we get an interesting simile. Clothes wave like tattered flags flying off. Literally, the women's clothes have been ripped and torn during the chaos. The ripped clothing is compared to tattered flags. But the simile is a little ambiguous. Are the clothes like tattered flags that are flying off? Or are the clothes flying off like tattered flags? Either way, the introduction of flags into the poem, specifically tattered or torn up flags, reinforces the idea of colonization. The Africans' flags have been tattered, have been torn up and stolen and soiled. The flags are a metonym. They represent the countries. A flag represents a country, doesn't it? Just like their clothes during the storm, the people's flags have become tattered. And if the flags are flying off, it means the countries are losing their national identities. Their flags are disappearing into the wind of colonization. But there might be another meaning. Maybe the flags that are being torn and thrown away are the flags of the colonizers. Maybe we are seeing a rebellion in action. Anyway, let's go back to the literal happenings. As the women's clothes are torn away, their naked bodies are exposed. We see dangling breasts. Literally, the clothes are torn up by the storm, exposing their breasts. But this could be symbolic of sexual violation. During slavery and during the height of colonization, African women were often raped. They were dominated by the colonizers. Maybe this is a reference to the men ripping off the women's clothes. After that, we get more imagery of the storm. We see jagged, blinding flashes. This is some wicked imagery that points to lightning. The lightning is jagged, which connects to sharp in line 3. The lightning is dangerous, like a jagged knife. There's a difference between jagged and sharp. When something is jagged, it is rough, uneven. This fits the image of torn clothes and screaming women. We see blinding because the lightning is bright, but also because the people are blind. What do I mean? If the torn flags are those of the African people, then the flying away of the flags might refer to their loss of identity. They are losing sight of themselves. The blindness might also be spiritual blindness, the wickedness, the perverseness of the colonizers. And then we have the flashes, which are the flashes of lightning. But the word is actually a pun here. To flash also means to briefly and often unintentionally expose one's naked body or underwear, particularly in public. This is a reference to the women's dangling breasts. What is rumbling, trembling, and cracking in the next line? Rumble and also crack are onomatopoeias that refer to loud noises or things breaking or shaking. The storm is causing the walls of the houses, maybe the roofs, to shake and split apart. We can also imagine thunder as the rumbling sound. What about trembling? The people are trembling. And what about the fired smoke in the next line? By the way, what even is fired smoke? It might be the smoke that remains as a fire is put out. Maybe cooking fires have been extinguished by the storm, and so the families must now go hungry. Maybe fireplaces have been extinguished by now, and the families must now grow cold. Maybe the fire and smoke refer to gunshots that are blasted by white men. The crack from the previous line could then refer to the cracking of whips, which might be a reference to slavery. By the way, we get some rumbling alliteration in the repeated sound. Rumble, tremble, amidst, smell, smoke. Let's read the last stanza all together, and then look at the last line. Clothes wave like tattered flags flying off to expose dangling breasts as jagged blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm. The marching here is like an army, and the pelting refers to how violent the storm is. To pelt means to bombard with missiles, to throw things at someone, to beat, to hit. The storm marches on, pelting the African people. The storm is personified as it pelts and marches, and that marks the end of the poem. So we saw themes of colonization, social and political turmoil. We saw man versus nature. We saw how man responds to nature versus how nature responds to nature. We got incredible images of this wicked storm, and hopefully you got a thorough understanding of this brilliant and potent poem. Some critics might think that this poem has nothing to do with colonization at all, and only depicts a literal storm. I disagree with that viewpoint, seeing the number of evidences that point to political undertones, especially in the diction in the first and last stanzas. However, you can understand the poem as either talking about just the literal storm, or you can see it as being about a storm that represents colonization. Neither interpretation is incorrect. Just make sure that you're able to justify with textual evidence whatever interpretation you choose. If this video was helpful, be sure to give it a like and share it with other students or lovers of literature. Thanks for watching. See you in the next analysis.